What's up, VC? Bobby B here. I'm back. It's 2019. This is take 2 of this video. I tried it a little bit earlier, but I guess I'm fighting off a cold. I didn't realize I was, but I was sniffing like crazy. So I dealt with that. Hopefully there'll be no sniffies throughout the course of this video. I'll try to keep it brief, but we're back with my top 100 albums of all time, and we're into the top 20 now. I know this has been taking a long time. I think we're coming on a year now that I've been doing this. Many have lost interest, which I completely understand. For those that are sticking around, hey, good to see you. Thanks for being here. I'm going to embark on the top 20 now. There are going to be albums that are very familiar to most of you, if not all of you, and then there may be a couple here that are surprises and kind of unique to my list. This, of course, is my top 20 albums as far as the way that I am feeling currently at the moment. So I hope you enjoy it. We're going to start right on into it at number 20, which this is an artist who's appeared on my list several times already. Gonna take a swig of coffee first. Sorry, the mouth is already getting dry. All right. Number 20. This artist has appeared on my list so many times already. He's no stranger to you. He's one of the most respected artists of all time. It is Mr. Bob Dylan. This is his album Blood on the Tracks, released January 20th, 1975 in our part of the world. This is my favorite Bob Dylan album. I think many people would agree with that. Of course, Bob Dylan has about 4 or 5 albums that I think a lot of people would cite as their favorite. This one here, though, is just so, it feels so personal and heartbreaking. Bob Dylan has often denied it, but it seems to be about this, or at least inspired by the breakup of his wife at that time. His son Jacob has acknowledged that he feels when he listens to the album, it is about his parents breaking up. But it's such an honest sounding album in the sense that there's a variety of emotions that a person must go through when they're dealing with something like that. I'm very, very happy to say that I haven't gone through that myself, but I can imagine that if you have, you know, the shifts in mood must be intense. And you see that in this album. You have beautifully heartbreaking songs like You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go, or If You See Her, Say Hello, to just scathing songs like Idiot Wind, where, I mean, it has some of the most caustic lines I've ever heard. He says, there's a line where Bob says, you're an idiot, babe. No, the idiot wind blows every time you move your teeth. You're an idiot, babe. It's a wonder that you still know how to breathe. I mean, just kind of suggesting that the act of taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide is too difficult for someone as mentally deficient as his ex-wife is. That's hurtful stuff. But yeah, just a brilliantly poetic album. Tangled Up in Blue, the first track on the album. I've often gone on record as saying it's my favorite song of all time. It's probably up there. But anyways, Bob Dylan sits nicely at number 20 on my list. While we're talking about deep albums, at number 19 is an album that's considered a benchmark in modern day indie rock. That term indie rock is such a vague term. It can take on so many other genres. But anyways, a lot of people, when they make reference to kind of where it's, you know, not really where it started, but kind of what put indie rock on the map, they'll refer to this album. It was released February 1998. It is by the band Neutral Milk Hotel, and the album is In the Aeroplane Over the Sea. This album was released on the Elephant Six label, which had a lot of what I would just call sort of power pop bands, but a lot of those bands are amongst my favorites of the time. The Apples in Stereo are one of those bands. You know, there are so many like that, but Neutral Milk Hotel sort of stood alone. Jeff Mangum's bizarre vocals. This album, as I mentioned, was quite deep. This album was basically inspired by the Diary of Anne Frank. That is some deep subject matter there, and it goes into that subject matter in very poetic ways. There are heavy kind of punks, not punk, but heavier songs with kind of fuzzy guitar songs. If you're curious as to what this album sounds like, the two tracks I would recommend are the song Holland 1945. That's one of the heavier ones. And then a song called, well, the title track, In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, which is a little bit more acoustic. And that gives you an idea of just the different twists and turns that the album takes. The album flows seamlessly throughout. The songs do lead into each other. There's other amazing songs. Two-Headed Boy. There's a three-part song called The King of Carrot Flowers. Just amazing. There's instrumental cuts on here too. And if you're into kind of modern day indie rock bands like the Decemberists or Death Cab for Cutie or even Radiohead, you'll hear the influence of this album on those albums as well. And the reason why we do kind of refer to it as a benchmark in indie music is because I think it was the 6th best-selling album of 1998, which is huge for an indie band. And then these days, when you got bands like Arcade Fire who winning Grammys and selling out stadiums and things like that, you see where, giving the music back to the people has become something. That's maybe a controversial statement, but anyways. Neutral Milk Hotel sitting at number 19. At number 18 is an artist we've already seen on this list, kind of in the lower region. I think in the 90s, I had an album by this artist, one of my favorite artists of all time. He's currently my bucket list artist, who I don't think it's ever going to happen. This album here was released September 1983. It's Tom Waits with Swordfish Trombones. As I mentioned in one of the previous videos, if you can remember back that long ago, there are basically two aspects, more or less, or two facets of Tom Waits' career. You've got the earlier part of his career, which is kind of more blues and jazz based, and then the second half of his career where it just gets kind of weird and eccentric. That's it in a nutshell. I mean, you can kind of break off, there's a bit of country early on, there's, kind of almost theatrical kind of music later on, but this is kind of where it starts getting weird. This is often kind of lumped in along with Rain Dogs, another amazing album, and Frank's Wild Years, which is an okay album. Those three are kind of considered sort of part of a trilogy. It's kind of hard to kind of separate those albums from each other, and I could see where that argument could come in. Rain Dogs could have easily made my list as well, but this is the one that I like best. This is the album where I listened to Tom Waits and went, okay, I get it. Okay, I could listen to lots of this. So same, kind of like the Neutral Milk Hotel, it does kind of jump from kind of harsh to beautiful. You've got songs like 16 Shells from a 30-06, which is just kind of weird. Down, 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 Troubles Braids. Those are songs where he gets very kind of flamboyant. I don't know if that's the right word. Definitely eccentric. And then you get songs like Time and no, Time isn't on this album. What am I talking about? In the Neighborhood. Time is on Rain Dogs. In the Neighborhood, and also Johnsburg, Illinois, which are just beautiful ballads. A couple of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. That's Tom Waits for you. Swordfish Trombones at number 18. Number 17, while we're talking about benchmark albums, this is considered one of the benchmark albums of shoegaze music. It was released November 1991, and it is the album Loveless by My Bloody Valentine. And this is this album, it's sort of like, if I don't know, if like the Ronettes sang over Lou Reed's Metal Machine music. It's just the weirdest. It's the weirdest thing because it's just loud ringing guitars that sound like noise, but if you listen closely, you hear the melody underneath, and they're beautiful melodies, and it's just, it's just it's an album that kind of almost hypnotizes you. I found that it took a few listens to understand. I think many would probably feel the same way, but once you're into it, it's there's no turning back, and it really is just a benchmark. And it's an album, much like most of these, as we're getting into the top 20, that I actually find I crave from time to time. This is the Plain Records pressing, the one that everybody hates, especially Kevin Shields, the mastermind behind My Bloody Valentine. He hates it. He says that this pressing was sourced from stolen material. He says basically you're just getting a CD pressed to vinyl. Could be. I mean, this type of music, it's not super well recorded anyways, so it's just kind of a wash of noise. So I don't know. Maybe I have a cheap turntable, but as I listen to this, this pressing doesn't sound that bad. He recently, My Bloody Valentine recently reissued the album in a pressing that they actually support and fully endorse. From what I've heard, it sounds amazing. I missed my opportunity to get it on its original run. I don't know, maybe I'll find a pressing at some point that I can buy, but it's whatever. I have this on CD, I have it on cassette, I've got it on MP3, and I've got this. Yeah, it doesn't sound that bad to me. And the vinyl itself is quite quiet too, but anyways. Everybody on earth disagrees with me. Everybody says this Plain Records pressing is terrible. So, so it is. But that is my number 17 album of all time. Number 16. Here's kind of one that I know will be unique to my list, or I'm pretty sure it will be. It was released November 1993. It's by a Canadian band from the East Coast known as Eric's Trip. And the album is entitled Love Tara. Did I say it was released November 1993? This is an unbelievable album that came out at the height of the grunge movement. You do hear elements of grunge in there, but I think more accurately it's kind of a lo-fi, indie rock. I don't know. I was going to say there's tinges of psych in here, but the thing is, Rick White, one of the guys behind Eric's Trip, went on to form some other bands, Elevator Through, Elevator to Hell, and all those bands are pretty psychedelic. Even some of his solo stuff kind of delves into psychedelia. This album, you maybe hear tinges of it, but not as much. This is an interesting album. It's released on Sub Pop. What's interesting about it is it's kind of like the indie rock version of Rumors. The two main artists in Eric's Trip, Rick White and Julie Doiron, have both gone on to have pretty prolific solo careers or careers outside of Eric's Trip. Eric's Trip did release 2 other albums after this, but at the time, Rick and Julie were a couple, and they were an item, and they formed the band, and they started recording, and then tensions grew within the band, and Rick White started seeking solace in, I believe her name is Tara D'Alessio or something. Yeah, I can't remember her name, but, well, it's Tara. Anyways, the album's called Love Tara, so this is where we're going. So Rick White basically started falling for Tara behind the scenes. Basically, they cheated on Julie. Tara was like Julie's best friend. Rick, whatever, big thing. So Julie and Tara and Rick hated each other by the time this album came out. Their feelings are expressed in many of these songs. To make it worse, the album is released. Rick White entitles the album Love Tara and doesn't tell Julie. Boom! You know that there's that GIF out there that has what's his face from Jurassic Park, just yeah, exactly. Anyways, amazing album. They've made their peace since then. I mean, I saw Eric's Trip, kind of a reunion concert, so maybe about 10 years ago. That blew my mind. It was unbelievable. But yeah, Behind the Garage. If you're curious as to what these guys sound like, I would recommend Behind the Garage and Stove. Stove is a heartbreaking and beautiful song. But it is weird. It's kind of a weird album. Eric's Trip, Love Tara, number 16, I think. 1870, yep, number 16. At number 15 on my list is an album that needs no introduction. And while we're continuing the love, we've had Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, we've had Love Tara by Eric's Trip, and now we've got A Love Supreme by John Coltrane, released January 1965. Free jazz, spiritual jazz. I mean, you know, what do I say about this album that hasn't been said before? It's considered one of the greatest jazz albums of all time, and for good reason, because it is mind-blowing, and there's new things to be discovered every single time I listen to this. It's very, very progressive for the time that it was released, I feel. Now, I don't know much about music from that time. I wasn't around in 1965. Maybe a lot of artists were doing this kind of thing, but you know, it's one of those jazz albums. I love jazz, and I'm trying real hard to be more of a jazz aficionado, but I do find it, I'm not that guy who it's like you hear, you know, a quick spot of jazz and it's like, oh, that's McCoy Tyner with blah 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 and blah blah blah. Like, I'm not that guy usually, but I recognize Love Supreme every time I hear it. It's just it's a perfect album. John Coltrane on tenor sax, McCoy Tyner on piano, Jimmy Garrison on bass, Elvin Jones on drums. Simple four-piece, but the amazing things that they do with those instruments is amazing. I wrote that review on the spot. That's one of those quotes. If you're going to use it, the amazing things on this album are amazing. If you're going to use that quote, I want it credited to Bobby Bottoms. Number 15. Number 14. It came out in April 1984. It is the second album by Athens, Georgia's R.E.M. Second full-length album, and it is entitled Reckoning. Look at how young the boys are there. Said it before, I'll say it again. The most perfect run of albums ever released was the run that R.E.M. released from 1982's Chronic Town EP through to 1987's Document. R.E.M. released five or six albums during that time. I was led to believe there would be no math today. Did you ever see Fletch? No, was that Fletch? Chevy Chase said that. Maybe it was Saturday Night Live. Yeah, I think it was Saturday Night Live. Yeah, he was being a presidential candidate, and they were going through the country's deficit or something, and he's like sweating, and he's like, well, I was led to believe there would be no math. Anyways, R.E.M., Reckoning. Murmur could have been here, their first album. It's considered a classic for good reason. But the reason why I say R.E.M. had the most perfect run of albums at that time is because there's not a single bad song in the bunch. They're all great. I mean, Bob Dylan, Stevie Wonder, the Beatles, you know, there are so many artists that had this just a run of really excellent, amazing albums. But, you know, every once in a while a little obla-dee would slip in there. There ain't no obla-dees on those 5 or 6 R.E.M. albums. It's perfect. Again, for the obla-dee obla-da fans, there ain't no obla-dee obla-das on here. R.E.M. Reckoning. Oh yeah, what songs are on here? Seven Chinese Brothers. Don't Go Back to Rockville, which is an alt country song before alt country was a thing. South Central Rain is one of my top 10 favorite songs of all time. And there's a song on here called Letter Never Sent that nobody ever refers to. R.E.M. doesn't ever mention it. I don't know if they've even ever played it in concert, but that is the sleeper song in R.E.M.'s catalog, if you ask me. This is back when Michael Stipe had the most perfect mumble. You can't understand a thing the guy says on this album. It's fantastic. R.E.M. Reckoning, number 14. Number 13 is an album that, if I am looking up right now, the album, where'd it go? Oh yeah, right here. Okay. Released June 1971. Depending on my mood, this album still, even though I've heard it 85 billion times, will make me cry like a little baby. It is possibly, well, it is. It's my favorite Canadian album of all time. Joni Mitchell, Blue. I mean, what can I say about this that hasn't been said before? This is a pretty nice copy of it. You'll notice it's a promo. It says promo sample. So this is a pretty early pressing of the album. It's got the textured cover. Yeah, Joni Mitchell's Blue. It's heartbreaking. This is a girl pouring out her soul. I don't know how sincere it is, but it sounds sincere. It's poetic. It's beautiful. Her voice, while it is an acquired taste for many, it was certainly an acquired taste for me. Once you get it, like a lot of these songs have been covered by other people, but you just can't beat Joni Mitchell. It's just her heart is pouring out into every song. Beautiful album. Joni Mitchell's Blue is my number 13 album of all time. Number 12 is one that doesn't need much of an introduction. It was released May 1967. According to Rolling Stone magazine and countless other publications, it's the greatest album ever released. It is the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And as I have mentioned in other videos, I have recently come to terms with the fact that it is currently my favorite Beatles record. And I shied away from saying that for a long time. Well, I guess for a long time I did consider Revolver to be my favorite, and you know, I really liked Rubber Soul and Magical Mystery Tour. They're all awesome albums, the White Album. But you know what? The one that I just enjoy listening to from start to finish, still to this day, is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And I don't think there's a bad track on here. I think every song, I really like the flow of the album. Songs I never used to like that much, Within You, Without You, and A Little Help From My Friends, I have grown to love. With a little help from my friends, okay, you know, it would be cool if it was the Joe Cocker version, to be honest. But you know what? At the same time, I love its place on this album. In the context of this album, it just sounds right. And yeah, you know, there are a lot of people who will disagree, but it's my favorite Beatles album now. And you know, just because the magazines and the critics, they're not always wrong. What can I say? They're not always wrong. Man, I love side 2. I love, you know, from Lovely Rita to the end of the album, you know, I just love side 2. Like Within You, Without You, you got this trippy, psychedelic, sitar-based George Harrison, you know, East Indian raga type of song that's just, and then it segues into like When I'm 64, which I think is just, I think that's a tremendously fun song. Like, that's the kind of fun I like. I prefer, you know, Obla Di Obla Da is not the kind of fun I enjoy. When I'm 64 is just so much fun. Then Lovely Rita to Good Morning to the Reprise to A Day in the Life, one of the greatest songs of all time. I love the flow of the album. Yep, Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, number 12. And my number 11 album of all time is Mr. Miles Davis. This album was released February 1971. It is Miles Davis, Jack Johnson, a tribute to Jack Johnson. This is not an original pressing of the album. In fact, this is the cover on the original pressings of the album. This is a soundtrack to a documentary film about American boxer Jack Johnson. It's 2 songs. Actually, you know what? The place where I bought this, I got to get a better pressing of this, although the record sounds quite good, but you see the cover is just trashed. And it has one of these stickers on here, but I left it on here because I kind of like the description. The record store described it as the weirdest roadhouse R&B record of all time, featuring Michael Henderson and John McLaughlin in especially amazing form. That sums it up right there. This is a jammy album. It is jazz, but I mean, jazz fusion. But yeah, like I say, you can rock, R&B fans, blues fans will love this as well. You've got Herbie Hancock on keyboards as well, Steve Grossman on sax, Bill Cobham on drums, Teo Macero provides some additional music on the first song. There are only 2 songs on the album, but Miles Davis, tribute to Jack Johnson. It's not my favorite Miles Davis album, which ends at number 11. 10 more albums to go. We're going to get into the top 10 as soon as possible. I hope I'll have it up next week or within a couple of weeks, but you know me with these empty promises. We'll see what happens. But anyways, it was nice talking to you guys. This has been Bobby B. Liner Notes on YouTube, The Vinyl Vagabond on Instagram. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.